just stop using fucking AI. If you're at a stage in your business where you don't need an AI agent team and you're doing like under 40 grand a month, 30 grand a month, just stop using fucking AI. Like, just build authentically as you would have in the past.
We all have superpowers. It's that you're not feeding the superpower. It's that you're not in the right seat inside of the organization. And a lot of the times when I find that there's management issues with somebody, it's usually because they're doing something that they're not meant for. It's like trying to cut a steak with a hammer, you know, it's not going to work. Building something great is really just saying no to everything that comes up that is not that thing. That the fabric of what a beautiful life is made up of is building intimate connections with other human beings. That's kind of it. And so the question is, does AI actually help with that? And I think the short answer is no.
Focus on the wins. Just win every day and acknowledge those victories. You said you were a chef, right?
Yes, I was a private chef for 7 years.
Okay, a private chef for 7 years. Can you, was there ever anything that you took from being a private chef for 7 years into what you're doing now with your marketing company? I'm really, really curious. Like any mental frameworks,
what
mental
are the
models?
Parallels? Yeah, for sure. So I think I'll go back and explain kind of the journey of what my life was like as a private chef and how I got into it in the first place. And it was a very simple thesis. When I was 18, 19, I got to go to Costa Rica. That was my first time taking a trip out of the United States, and I was absolutely blown away. And I spent a month and a half studying Spanish, 5 hours a day, surfing 5 hours a day. And by the time I left, I had this sort of just desire to find a way to get paid to travel because I had no idea where I wanted to live. It like flipped my world on its head. It was like, oh my God, this is one country. This is one additional language. How do I know what language I want to speak, right? And so I left that experience with this kind of this one phrase, which is I want to find a way to get paid to travel. I want to find a way to make this my vehicle for seeing the world. And that's how I ended up becoming a chef, through basically finding this niche of working on motor yachts. And on these motor yachts, you know, these are all owned by super high net worth individuals, and they're sort of the ultimate vacation machine, right? They're able to send their floating hotel anywhere in the world and go do these insane trips. And I got to go all over the world. I hit something like 50 countries in 7 years and got to see, I got to see a lot of the world and really fulfilled that dream. But I think along the way, I realized that, you know, this was, as a career, it had limitations. And so
like what, out of curiosity, like, did you feel that limitation all the way throughout, or was it like you got to a certain point and you felt these limits?
It got to a certain point where I started to feel the limits. I think, first of all, it was just very taxing, like the taxing emotionally, mentally, and on the body. You know, when you have guests on board, you're working anywhere from 14 to 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, because these are this is like basically a floating hotel for a family that is very active, right? Billionaires do not chill. So, you know, it was very wearing on sort of my mental state. And I realized over time that, you know, I was living somebody else's dream and I wanted to create my own. And so the transition, to bring this full circle, from being a private chef to starting my own business, was recognizing that all of the people that I worked for that had these, you know, these dream lives in a lot of ways, they all had one thing in common, which was that they owned businesses. And I realized if I truly wanted to, you know, get the freedom that I desired, which was not necessarily having to work for myself or working for somebody else and being able to work for myself, determining my own hours, being on my own time and living my own dream life, that I needed to take a step away from this career as a private chef and transition into becoming a business owner. And in 2016, I jumped ship in Malaga, Spain, and that was the end of one journey in the start of a new chapter, where I started a business in Central America, moved there full time, and spent 3.5 years building a company in Panama. Mm-hmm. And so that was my like leap into what I think is a really cool thing to talk about, which is the 4 freedoms, which is a principle that Dan Sullivan, who's one of the godfathers of business consulting, teaches, which is freedom of time, freedom of money, freedom of relationship, and I believe that the 4th one is freedom of location. Mm-hmm. And so what really I believe all business owners, why go into this, start your own thing, we all have this one desire, this shared desire to expand those 4 freedoms. And I didn't realize what I desired at the time, but that I think is really the game of business, is gaining more of those four freedoms through this vehicle that we call business, and marketing just so happens to be the first part of the whole, how to get customers, right?
Yeah.
The first domino that you need to knock over when you're building a business successfully.
Do you feel like now you're at a point where you're very clear, or have you been intentional about getting clear on those four freedoms? Because I feel like I was like this when I started my business, when I started working for, Adam, my previous mentor. I wanted freedom, but had no idea like what actually that meant. We have such a fugazi definition of it. Did you start out like knowing like, I know I want freedom in this specific way, or was that also like an overtime thing for you?
It's an overtime thing, and I think it shifts for everybody over time as well. There's many different chapters of life. I feel like I've lived a lot of different lives, and each one of those has been sort of my own experimentation with understanding and sort of defining what I believe freedom is, pursuing it, and then discovering along the way what the next iteration of freedom looks like. And it shifts over time, right? And sometimes earlier on, I had this real passion for travel and movement and newness and novelty. And then I realized, oh, that's great, but I also long for some stability and roots and community. And so, I think over time, particularly as you go from your 20s to your 30s, your desires shift.
Yeah. Forget the chef question. Let's move on from that one. I want to know what kind of season you're in now. Like you're, a little bit older than I, like you said, you've lived like a whole bunch of lives. Are you in a season now where I presume you're clear on what freedoms you want, but like maybe what is that freedom that you're striving for now? Because you can't like aim without a target, Yeah,
100%. So I think having a home base is really important to me now. I'm in Miami. I was in Colombia for 8 months before this. I think along the entrepreneurial journey, there's chapters where you are willing to, I think, sacrifice the short-term sort of desire to stay planted or do particular things and to chase, to follow paths that present themselves to see what's on the other side of it. Because I think a lot of the times we fall back on our safety nets and we don't realize we're sitting in our safety nets. Yeah. And so we don't take chances that we otherwise, because it feels safe. And so I have reaffirmed that I really find home base a mandatory thing, not living out of a suitcase at this. I'm 37 years old. So it was manageable for me and I didn't mind it even into my early 30s. But now it's really important to me to have a home base. And I think what I've found when I do set a home base for too long and don't move, I lack this concept of novelty where things start to feel stagnant and routine becomes monotony. And so I think the art form that I'm working on right now is finding that balance of groundedness, particularly community, I think is one of the pillars that I did not put as much weight on the importance of earlier on. And so I'm really working on investing into that here in Miami. And then secondarily, like also finding a way to weave in novelty to where I don't sort of find the routine or don't fall back into this feeling of routine being monotonous or stagnant.
Yeah. Maybe you're explaining it almost as you just said it, but like, what is novelty to you? Maybe for me, I feel as though I might have a skewed definition relative to your perspective. 'Cause I feel that, but I also feel as though I'm struggling from what it is you're describing, but having a home base. So maybe I'm confused on what novelty is.
Novelty, I think one simple way of describing it might be newness. And so that could be, I think there's a lot of different ways that you could look at newness in the micro and the macro. Newness for me, a lot of the times has always been exploration of other countries, cultures, and communities. And so that's, I believe, why when I've sat in one place for too long, I literally just push the eject button and go move to Colombia for 8 months. And then long to come back. And so I think you can do that on the sort of global macro of like, I move around frequently and actually change my physical location, I believe is one of the easiest ways of doing it. And when, weaving in the ultimate novelty, I think is not just taking a vacation like down the road or into another state or even to a neighboring country where things might just be slightly different. But I go, the extreme version of that is where you don't speak the language.
Yeah.
You're unfamiliar with the culture and the food and the sort of daily life of that place. So I think there's levels of novelty. You could also look at novelty like being meeting a stranger, like saying hi to a stranger walking down the street and starting a conversation. You look at novelty like pursuing a new pastime, picking up ceramics or pottery as a pastime. So I think there's a number of different ways of weaving it in. And another addition that I think is really interesting is what you're doing right now. I think there's a principle that one of my mentors taught me, that there are 3 different types of relationships that we have. There's people that we feed into. There's people that so sort of mentees. There's people that we have peers, sort of intellectual sparring partners, or both on the personal side and the business side. And then there's people that we receive from and sort of our mentors. And so when there's those are out of balance, I believe that this is something that I've been noticing recently, and why I'm really enjoying going on doing podcasts and speaking with other people and sharing ideas, because it allows me to really have all 3 and maintain all 3 of those relationships constantly, so that there is this new ideas, concepts, and giving also is something that can be novel in different ways as well. So there's not really a hard and fast rule for novelty. I think it's about discovering what is novelty for you, and what allows you to not, if you're feeling a certain way, like you're feeling stagnant, then how do you weave in a level of novelty into your day-to-day life that, makes you fulfilled?
And there's a lot that I want to unpack there, because I thought it was so interesting about those 3 relationships, because I think having or overcompensating in one of the areas and not having enough of the other is a pathway to having like an overblown ego, depending on which side of the spectrum that you go to. But first, I want to ask then, like, what's novelty to you then right now? Because you said, I used to always pack up and move, but now you're in a home base. So did you take up pottery? Are you doing like some stuff like that now? Like what's novel for you if you're trying to keep that in your life?
Yeah. So one, I think, is just changing up your routine and having different groups of friends. I think that to me is having a number of different groups of friends keeps things really interesting. And so you always are like, I think life is all about relationships, right? We just said. So maintaining a number of different groups of friends and continuing to invest in those different avenues will always bring you into this newness that you previously didn't have, because people live differently, right? And so being curious and being willing to say yes to things that you otherwise might not have, I think, is one way of just sort of welcoming and approaching this with novelty with open arms. I'm in a chapter of business where my business still requires a lot from me, and so I do not have as much time for these sort of outside extracurricular activities as I may have in different chapters. Yeah. However, there's certain passions of mine that I would previously say no to that I now have a yes policy, which is free diving. For me is one of the most incredible ways of truly disconnecting. Because you are quite
crazy, by the way.
Yeah, you're quite literally immersing yourself. And so it's kind of like James Clear's Atomic Habits. Like, how can you make it easy to do things? It's like, well, it's really easy to not be on your laptop or your phone when you're spend 7 hours underwater.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
It's sort of a forced sabbatical. And, it was one of the sort of ethoses of coming from the yachting industry was this like concept of, being a private chef was work hard, which we did very well, but we also played hard. Yeah. And so keeping that kind of building your ethos of like, all right, I'm going to put my head down and work 6 to 7 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day, because I'm really passionate about what I'm building. Yeah. But also I'm a human being and I need to pause. And so finding that passion, going hard on 1 or 2 things that you're super passionate about that also take you to new places. Each time I go spearfishing, like on 2 days from now, I'll be flying to the Bahamas with a new group of guys that I've never dove with before. Sick. And we'll be off into a new area, a new section of the Bahamas for an adventure. So that's one way I'm doing that.
Do you think that you would still apply that same mental model, like knowing what you know today, to the younger version of Gray, for example, or even like if it were me? Because the reason I asked that question is I have so many clients, and we're both connected to a bunch of entrepreneurs and stuff, and everybody has this workhorse mentality now, and they spend very little time enjoying. And as a result of that, build resentment for either the business, or they hit a milestone and have no idea what to do after that, right? There's a zero like vision after a certain point. So would you say that if you were to go back to, I don't know, when you first started the marketing company, when you like, you know, built the business in Panama, would you still tell yourself to just beat the wall of business, or would you kind of be like, yo, like take some time, play hard as well, or yeah, play hard as well? What do you think you kind of mental framework you would give yourself?
Yeah, I think a lot of the times when we start a business and you're in your early days of entrepreneurship, you have you don't truly understand the game that you're playing. And one of the things that I was excited to share today is this, something that I've come back to many, many times, which is this concept of 10,000 hours.
Yep.
In the beginning, what you're actually doing, you know, we always think like, yeah, you see all these people on Instagram who are just, you know, 12 months into their business journey, doing 100,000 a month and, you know, making lots of money and blah, 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 right? At least that's the shiny facade that they put up on the internet. And that's the lie that I think a lot of people are being sold. And even if that does happen, that doesn't mean their next business didn't flop and the one after that didn't flop and that they went into a depression because they saw, you know, they saw what money could look like and then they had to deal with the realities of not having it. And
Yep.
so going through that's the truth of the matter is there's ebbs and flows no matter what level of the game that you're at. And the concept of 10,000 hours is that, you know, true mastery of a craft doesn't start really until you hit your 10,000 hours. And so when you're starting a business, what you're really doing is starting your journey of investing 10,000 hours into getting good at something, really. And you don't realize when you start it that you're actually getting into a marathon. And that what comes in 12 months is, even if you put your head down, you know, there's about 2,000 working hours in a year. If you really double down, you could even get it up to 2,500 or 3,000. But no matter what, you still got to pay the tax. And so we expect results as if we have our 10,000 hours, but we don't yet have our 10,000 hours in whatever the subject matter is. And I think that's a really important thing, a foundational understanding of the game that you're playing, which changes the perspective. Now, you were asking me like, what would I tell my past self how to enjoy life more along the way? I think the reason I say the 10,000 hours thing is because I didn't realize the game that I was playing, and therefore I forgot that, hey, I'm in a marathon. Like, let's look around and look at the beauty of the trees and the flowers and the birds chirping. And not just have our head down trying to sprint to the finish line so that we're, you know, until we hit this number that we've put in our heads as I won't be happy until I reach that. So I'm definitely a culprit of that. I think we, particularly in this day and age where we're watching a lot of people on the internet that are very successful, we have a false sense of the game that we're playing.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're really up against. And so surrounding yourself with people who prioritize joy, I think is a very, very powerful thing. And, also just finding the practices and your foundation, what's your floor for happiness? And we all have our own definition of that. I'm curious what yours is.
My definition of happiness?
Yes.
That's a great question. I think over the last 2.5 years, it's drastically changed through different seasons. And so I think it began when I first started the make money online, leave your 9-to-5 job journey. It was, strictly speaking, anything that was evidence that I wasn't the man I was before gave me happiness. So if I could do something at a certain time within the confines of the hours of 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. that wasn't work, I was like, okay, this is happiness for me. I lost sight of that very quickly, and then happiness became work. And my identity was work. That affected my relationships. And so paradoxically, I thought I was happy in those moments, but in truth, I was really like lost. Now, what it's developed, like through my own personal transformation with the mind, being able to facilitate that transformation for other people now, talking to people like yourself, understanding those perspectives, being a lot more intentional on what it means to like live. For me, what is happiness? I think for me now, it's it's gone kind of back to stacking evidence that I am living in the reality that I desire, right? And so if that means taking time, again, within the hours of 9 to 5, kind of full circle, and going to play pickleball with my dad, that's happiness for me. Happiness for me is like my emotional state is where I desire it to be. If the end goal would be just, I don't even know how to describe, you know, that feeling where you're just like content, like life is good. Not in a, I don't want more or to strive for more way, but just like in a, this is great, the world is beautiful. That kind of feeling is my happiness. I try to like maximize that as much as possible. That was a really convoluted answer to your very simple question, but it is a very...
It's not an easy question. It's a simple question, and to say it's not so easy to answer. I think it's very, very individual.
I think it's one of those unteachable lessons. Like Chris Williamson talks about that. Michael Smoke talks about that. And Deepak, who's a mutual friend of ours, actually, that night that we met, the first time that we met after you had left, gave me like one of the most insane insights ever, that I hadn't ever thought of it in this way. And it was that journey of knowing what happiness was for me, then being really, really, really unhappy, but thinking that I was happy. And then now coming full circle back to understanding what happiness is for me is one of those things that if you would have given me advice on not taking action on something that would have put me through that journey, that would have been a disservice to me. Because what a beautiful experience it is, and uniquely human experience it is, to go through that emotional variability and self-discovery. And I think mentorship oftentimes reduces the capacity for that, which is like, mentorship is great, but it's also a minor flaw. What do you think about that? Being someone that has mentors who are incredibly wealthy.
You think that mentorship reduces the capacity for that?
Yeah, I think it's really good and serves very well. But I also think it leaves open the possibility for you not to go through a very uniquely human experience of self-discovery.
Yes. Yeah, I think there's the way in which mentorship unfolds, I think is really important. And I've spent a lot of time doing men's work in groups with men who are all working on, for lack of a better term, personal development, their own experimentation with existence and having discussions around it. There was one of the groups that I was in where when we shared, we'd all go around, someone would share kind of, hey, I'm dealing with this one situation. And the challenge was that you were not allowed to say should. So you can't say, hey, oh yeah, you should do this. Instead, you had to share a reflection of your own experience with dealing with something that's parallel to that, right?
Yep.
You didn't have to, but if you felt called to share something that you thought would be helpful to this person. And so I think that, you know, we're calling mentorship. Mentorship can have many different forms. Sometimes it's just having a sparring partner, right? I think that's a lot of it is just creating the space for us to have self-reflection. You can do that alone, but it's really helpful when you have other people to do that with. And I think mentorship can take a lot of different forms, and it can also be something that could be toxic, theoretically, right? If you're in pursuit of a very narrow goal, and it's usually some version of a monetary goal, and you start to follow somebody else's path that is not the path that you were meant to go on. But that's also learning, right? That's also part of the learnings. Is half of it is learning what not to do. In fact, maybe more than half.
Yeah, the majority. Are you seeing any like negative patterns in, let's call it the mentorship space, because it's very normalized now, especially in our environments, to seek out mentors, people who are where we want to be, people who know what we want to know. Are there any negative patterns that you're seeing relative to that? You know, where it's really more of like it's toxic, but not that's not the intention. If you know what I mean?
Mhm. I think without talking about something that isn't a felt experience, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if I would say that I've had the only situation where I've seen it unfold is when people are in positions of power that don't truly live their teachings. And I think that can be dangerous,
Yeah.
where particularly if they are, it's I don't want to say the word like falsifying things, but they're just not really in alignment, right? They're not
Yep.
truly doing the thing, and yet they're pedestalized as the person that you should be looking up to. And but even within that, that is so much of a human experience where we all have these hypocrisies that we live with, that it
Yep.
starts to make everybody around you, you start to realize, hey, we're all human.
Mm-hmm.
Even the people who are seemingly at the top have the same issues. I've used to cook for people that had $20 billion, family office, and their own money, right?
Yeah.
And and they had worse relationship challenges than most of my friends do, and so your personal relationship challenges. And so no matter what, you don't escape those things. And I think it's part of like realizing that Santa Claus isn't real. It's part of the human experience.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. You mentioned something there that's super interesting. You said alignment. What does that mean to you? Alignment, to be aligned.
Yeah, a really great question to unpack. The I think alignment for me means that you have a set of values that you put forward, and that
Mm-hmm.
you are actually in pursuit of living the life behind those values. I don't think that it means and in decision making criteria for which you filter things. So I think that to me is it's individual. It's not something that, and it can be a shared thing as well. Like in a company, if you have a set of values and you're not actually acting in accordance with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my take on it. What's your take on alignment?
You have 3 hours? No, I'm just kidding. Um, the reason I asked, I'll explain my take in a moment, is because I had what would you call it, a friend of mine who's a sales coach reach out to me, message me out of the blue. He said, Tristan, I have a question for you. And I said, okay, fantastic. And he's worked with some of the bigger names in the mindset space, like very, very popular. And he was asking me the question. He was like, what is your definition of alignment? And the reason he wanted to know is because alignment for these other coaches that he had worked with was everything is alignment. So in the spiritual sense, no matter what happens to you, you are always in alignment because it is the result of the
Mm,
frequency that you're putting out into the universe, and you are aligned to that frequency, right? And he basically said that as a result of that, that means that people can knock me off of my own alignment. External circumstance can impact that. And that
mm.
generated for him a lack of control, which is something that he struggled with. And so let me throw the question back to you before I answer it. What is your definition of alignment in the spiritual sense? Maybe not in the behavioral sense. They are connected, but maybe a more specific interpretation.
Mm. So I'll go to I think we all naturally, I think part of, and this is, I've discovered this most intimately through doing extensive work with psychedelics.
Okay.
Um,
Which ones?
Mushrooms.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot, many journeys with mushrooms in a guided format. And I think when one of the clearest moments of understanding what your true calling is, I think happens. I've had the clearest vision of true calling, which is something that is very ethereal. Like you can't. It's a feeling. It's a download. It's a connection to an energetic force that is not something that perhaps it can be measured, right? But it's not something that I can show you on a piece of paper. I can write it out and try to interpret it.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the doing mushrooms was the clearest vision I've ever had of what calling is, like higher calling, and or your connection with your guides, all of these things. And so I think living in alignment is understanding and listening to those callings. I think it's actually pursuing the thing that is, knocking you over the head again and again, and being receptive to listening to it and actually being willing to hear it and act on it. So, but what it is specifically, I cannot put really into words.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I love how that is your truth, and for those other people, that was their truth. I think that's something that most people fail to internalize as, I guess, a truth, is that we all experience reality through our perception and through our lived experience and our beliefs. And so as a result of you having these lived experiences through mushrooms, only you can have that very unique truth, and that dictates the way that you perceive the world. Whereas for me, I haven't had that psychedelic experience. I haven't felt that energetic presence. And so my definition of alignment is different. I believe that alignment is, again, your behaviors and your operations relative to not where you want to be, but essentially like the frequency that you want to be at. So if my desired reality is a certain frequency or emotional state, which is essentially the same thing, then I think alignment is just dictating all of my actions to be in that or get closer to it. And any action that would be not that would be out of alignment. And so it would suffice to say that people can knock me out of alignment, but it is my responsibility and my ability to go back into alignment. Would you agree with that in any capacity? Obviously, it doesn't need to be your truth, but I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I think in some ways we're saying a relatively similar thing. I think what I'm talking about is, this connection of what you're talking about is a frequency, right? Or a state that you desire or that you already have access to. And so it's spending more time through a set of actions in that state. And I think that's a very similar, I'm using the word calling because that's the one that came to me. And I think that it's a very similar thing. I think it presents itself in our existence and actions, or, whatever the physical manifestation of it is, whether that's a feeling, like you said, or whether that's I would say mostly the human interpretation would be an internal state.
Yeah. I like how you said human interpretation. I think the unconscious mass of people, those people who maybe haven't done a bunch of mushrooms and found their internal calling, or haven't meditated, or, find themselves stuck one side of the pendulum, they're always like searching for the truth. I don't know what you believe in, but I think religion is the single greatest example of that. Humans are always looking to explain the inexplicable, and thus they, come up with stuff, and for the sole purpose of finding the truth. But I don't think, I think after reading the Kabbalion, I think you know that book, right? The Hermetic Principles and stuff, I came to the conclusion that I don't believe that as humans we have the consciousness required to understand what the truth even would be if it was presented to us. We are so minuscule in the grand scheme of, I don't know, all this energetic stuff. Man, I love talking about this. I could talk about it for hours and hours and hours. And ironically enough, that's why I even started this, because I wanted to talk to people like this. But yeah, that's a super good insight. I think for me, it would serve me well to find my calling, maybe more so than I feel as though I already have, because I feel like increasing the consciousness level of humans is what I feel called to do right now, but maybe that will change, in a new season. Do you feel like that understanding has been the greatest proponent for your success, or has it been maybe some other things?
would say it's definitely, first of all, we need to define success.
Material success.
Yes, well, I mean, I'll tell you so part of what happened when I left the yachting industry was I felt like I would say that my internal state was not the place that I wanted to be.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way of describing it. My internal world was not the best place that I could be. And so that's what sort of embarked me on a journey to get a deepened understanding of what all of the components of what was the makeup of your internal world. What was the makeup of just a deep self-understanding the human experience.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, doing these mushroom journeys helped me to, again, and this is I think there's there's a line in the sand between psychedelics, and I think a lot of people are sort of like, hey, people have their own opinion of psychedelics as a vehicle for getting access to this, right? And they have their own preconceived notions. They're illegal in most countries. And so there's a lot of people who just don't feel right doing that. Another way of doing that, of this experimentation, there's many ways of getting access to this plane. And I think one of the ways that I've continued to do experimentation is through breathwork, through meditation, and you get access to a lot of the same things, perhaps not as intensely, but through my mushroom journeys and through my own experimentation with breathwork and these different modalities to get access to this altered state, and perhaps uncloud or remove the filter of the ego and through this lens that we're looking through that keeps us from really having this true deep understanding of these things, or this felt understanding of what your calling is, or direction, or your truth, I think is probably the best way of describing it. Through these vehicles, my company manifested itself. In fact, the name Whole Founder, which is the name of my agency, came to me in a mushroom journey. Like, it was very much given to me in a mushroom journey. So I would say that yes, my pursuit of deepening my understanding of the self has 100% impacted my success. And I'm not saying that everyone needs to go do a mushroom journey to get access to that. That's kind of part of the reason why I was sharing about these other modalities and just studying this stuff and getting to know your subconscious mind better, and your own habits and patterns and beliefs, and whether they're chosen or not, and unpacking those things and getting familiar with the discomfort of digging into, the fabric of your makeup, which sometimes is a beautiful pursuit and sometimes it's a really scary and challenging pursuit. And I think being a warrior to go and continue to pursue that, no matter what your materials, the manifestation of it in the material world, I think we're all put on this earth to deepen our understanding of, of moving through things, whatever that is, it's, in human beings, we like to look at things in black and white, and it's never black and white. It's all just an experimentation with this existence. And hopefully looking at it more of play than this serious thing that feels heavy and challenging at times.
Yeah. Would it be fair to say then that, so obviously material success aside, it has been probably the most important thing that you've focused on to get to the state that you're in now, like internally?
Yes.
Yeah. I was curious to hear your answer, because for me, it's like, immediate, yeah. The man I used to be, I think it's kind of like a rabbit hole a little bit. You find out, or at least my journey was finding out, okay, my dad's going through shadow work, my parents are getting separated, I probably have stuff that happened to me when I was younger that is dictating my personality now. Let's explore it a little bit. Then you find you got limiting beliefs. Then you find, oh my God, the holy shit. There's a whole lot of them. And then you go down the rabbit hole of like all this manifestation stuff. And for me, I think also because it serves my ego to feel like I know these things, but it's also been the thing that set me free from what I call, it's essentially like two-faced confidence. You know, had we spoken 5 years ago, you probably would have assessed me, unless you have like some X-ray personality vision, as a confident individual, or at least outspoken in some capacity. But that was just bullshit. You know, it's just a performance. And through self-confrontation, you build a self-understanding, a more secure self-concept, and self-love. I think all roads lead back to self-love. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Have you ever heard of parts work?
Parts work? I haven't heard of it, no.
Okay, really cool framework, which is that the self is not singular. We're made up of a number of different parts. And so there's angry gray, there's sad gray, there's happy gray, there's frustrated, and all of these different parts are made up. We have this makeup of a bunch of these different parts that come together. And so the idea is basically there's an internal family system that's going on, and your relationship to these parts is really, really important. And the ones that are, usually through trauma, which we all experience at some capacity. Everyone has a different definition of what trauma is. Some people think trauma is only, people who haven't done a lot of work think trauma is exclusively something that happened that was like physically bad to you, but it can be emotionally, right? And we have different levels of sensitivity. And so something that someone went through, like a severe car crash, could be the same thing as someone who got yelled at when they were young in a very vulnerable moment in their life, right? Yeah. And so there's these parts that get exiled. And so a lot of the parts work is basically going and meeting these parts and creating the space to be able to go and have these conversations with your internal relationships with these different parts. And a lot of the way of healing this is to listen to them and sort of understand because they're usually stuck at a certain age. So if you've had an exiled part through trauma, you're usually stuck at whenever that happened, 9 years old. And so these parts can't relate to you, the late 20s, 30-year-old you, because they're stuck at age 9. And so having these conversations with them, making them feel seen and heard, like you're talking to a child, you wouldn't be mean to a 4-year-old, right?
Maybe,
but you're mean, but a lot of the times we beat ourselves up, right? So I think that's kind of a lot of the work to be done. And you talk the relationship to self-love here is that, this is the way in which you sort of work through these things and unexile these parts is by basically showing them love, right? Which is, wrapping your arms around them mentally and saying, I love you. It's okay. You're not, you don't need to be afraid, or you don't need to be, there's no need to be exiled, right? And so it's that continued work with that.
Is that a Jungian framework?
It's designed by, I forget the guy's name. There's a book called No Bad Parts, and the therapy model is called Internal Family Systems. There's a really good book.
Yeah, that I've heard of before, Internal Family Systems. But the reason I ask is because it sounds so close, and again, it's all kind of developments over top of previous, let's call it study, but it sounds very similar to the shadow, right? Just maybe a deeper interpretation of what the shadow is in different parts. No pun intended.
Yes.
Interesting. I should do that. Should look into doing that. Can you explain human design to me and to the audience? Because last time we talked, we briefly went over it, and I thought it was super interesting. I also thought, man, it's so funny that we're talking about this now, because had you told me about it 2 years ago, I would have called you fucking crazy. Like, this sounds like bullshit. And I haven't gone about doing it yet myself because I don't have my time of birth. I needed to get a certificate from the hospital and pay for it, and then it got lost under the other 100 things that I wanted to do. So what is human design? And yeah, we'll start there.
Sure. So human design is, and I'm not like the resident expert on human design in general. However, I've found it to be an incredibly valuable tool in understanding myself.
In business too, right?
In business, yeah. And as we actually now, as we continue to build, I look through the lens and get to understand what all of my team members' human design is or are, because it allows me to understand them better. And so this concept of human design is basically based in astrology, and it has to do with the time and place you were born and the alignment of the planets. And if you had said that I'd be basing my business decisions off of astrology a few years ago, I'd also think I was going crazy. But I found it to be incredibly accurate. And the concept is there's a few of these different archetypes. So I like to use the analogy of a video game. If you were to play a video game, even if you played Mario Kart at one point, there's a bunch of different characters that are in these video games. And if you play like more, different types of video games, there's usually each character has different skills, right? They have a different makeup. So, your warrior is not going to have the same set of skills as a magician, right? And I find that human design really helps to understand what is your sort of makeup of your character, and that we're not all just one flavor of human being. We sort of all know that we're different, but there was no sort of guidebook to understanding who you are. And I felt like after reading Human Design, it was introduced to me through some friends that are entrepreneurs, and it sort of blew my mind of how accurate this is. I believe there's 5 main archetypes. And each one has their own set of superpowers. And a lot of times, we, particularly as entrepreneurs or human beings on planet Earth, we compare ourselves to other people. And this was one of the first times that I realized, I was like, oh, no wonder why I just operate differently than this person who I look up to and compare myself to as an entrepreneur. Because I'm literally a different player in the game. And I'll give you a more granular explanation of what my particular archetype is, which is a projector. And a projector, I don't know if have you ever heard of EOS or Entrepreneur's Operating System?
Yes, but
I'll give
I don't know what it is.
Cool. So basically a system for running business, and the guys who founded it came up with this concept of the integrator and the visionary, right? There's the person who has the vision, the entrepreneur, they have these big ideas, and then there's the integrator, who's the person that actually does the work. And so, and integrates all of these ideas and turning them into a reality. And so you need both of those people inside of the business for things to really thrive, right? Yeah. You don't have to have them, but it is very helpful to have both of those people in the business. So Human Design takes it one step further. The projector is very much the visionary. They're the ones who can see things. They're the seers. They see all the angles and where to go. And they usually end up being advisors. I would not be surprised if you're also a projector. We end up feeling really good being coaches, doing mentorship, because we can see things that other people can't about themselves. Yep. And it is an incredible superpower. I believe only 20% of the world we are the smallest group of people, I think, something like that. But it's incredible. However, it's really hard for us to also be the executor in things. And so what I've learned, and my business partner, Natalia, is a generator. And a generator is a person that sits down and can work for 12 hours and get all of these things done. And I always felt, I'm like, why that I don't feel like sufficient. There's something wrong with me. Like, why can I not sit down and just do and produce as much as she can produce in a day? It made me feel inferior as a team member. And I realized, I was like, oh, I'm not meant to do that. Right. And then all of a sudden, our conversation started to change when we both did our own readings and started to deepen our understanding, and worked with people that are human design experts to help us to deepen our understanding of ourselves and how we relate to each other. Like, what are our superpowers, and also what are our weaknesses, right? Or what are the things that we are not so good at that we need support with, that each other is really strong at? And therefore we know, like, oh, no wonder why you act this way, or you do things this way. And for me, it's just been one of the most liberating things, because it's like, I'm not meant to do this thing. Now, at the end of the day, I still have to execute, I still have to do things. Yeah. But it allows me to at least to architect a business and design roles inside of the organization based off of who's going to be the right person for that specific job based on their archetype. And I think a lot of people, they go through their day to day, whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you work for a company, like feeling like you're not sitting in the right seat. And I think so much of that is understanding yourself and what your superpowers are, so that you can communicate that in a way that's really concrete, and you can actually start to change everything around you. And if you're the entrepreneur, you design this, right? You do this by design and filling in these roles,
Yep.
or delegating things. But if you're even within an organization, you don't feel like you're in the role, like it's important for you to understand why. We all have superpowers. It's that you're not feeding the superpower. It's that you're not in the right seat inside of the organization. And a lot of the times when I find that there's management issues with somebody, it's usually because they're doing something that is not really meant, they're not meant for. It's like trying to cut a steak with a hammer, it's not going to work.
So you would say that, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm interpreting this in the wrong way, but when you go through the interview process for hiring an employee, you genuinely ask them, give me the time and the geographic location of your birth, and then answer these questions. And based on that, I'm going to hire you, or I'm not going to hire you.
I invite team members to do this exercise. I think it's incredible. And I should also say before I get into that, I do not like straight up say yes or no to people because of that, but yeah. I have a pretty good idea of who's going to be the right person for the job. If you're a builder, for example, we are a marketing agency, we make ads, we build funnels, we do all these things. Like a projector should not be building funnels. They should not be doing technical setup. They should not be setting up, complex automations. They're really good at helping design them. They're really good at helping to give feedback and critique and be a sounding board and be an auditor, but they're not the person to sit down and build funnels for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So I pretty much have a good understanding. And the other thing about this is that people tend to have a propensity towards certain jobs because of their archetype. But I would say that it's important to understand this, and I invite people to do this because it's like a DISC assessment, right? You've all heard of DISC assessments or these different personality type assessments, which are helpful. But I think human design is the one that has a depth that I've just never found otherwise.
So maybe I'm confused, because there's the 5 energy types. There's the generator, the manifesting generator, the projector, the manifester, and then the reflector. And then you mentioned, which I would love to be this archetype. We'll see when I actually decide to move forward with filling out the information. It is a projector. So projectors are natural guides and leaders. They do not have sustainable energy to work all day. They are simply here to guide others. They wait for an invitation to share their wisdom, and their theme is success. So how does that differentiate maybe from a manifester, who are the initiators of the world? They spark new ideas and push them forward. Their strategy is to inform people before they act, so they avoid resistance. Their theme is peace. I kind of see the difference, but they seem very the same in a lot of ways.
Yeah, projectors are CEOs, manifestors are head of HR. No, I'm just kidding. But I
would have taken that as truth.
Yeah, there's so much nuance to the individual. There's all of these different paths. You could spend, a full day just reading into your specific archetype within that. And there you don't, it's not as, hey, these are the hard boundaries of what you're good at and what you're not good at. Manifestor is actually an interesting one. I have not met a lot of manifestors, and I have not had manifestors on my team. I usually find, and I'll give you some more like concrete examples. I usually find that we always partner with, in all of my business partnerships outside of my main one that I have with my business partner, Natalia, it's almost always a manifesting generator that comes in. And it's really interesting because the visionary is the person that sees where we need to go. The generator is the person that goes like an inch wide and a mile deep. They love like shutting out the world, turning off Slack and all notifications and just going deep on one specific thing. But manifesting generators like to keep lots of things. They're really good at keeping lots of things going at once. And I found that usually we partner with, as a team, we'll partner with just naturally. Like before I even ask them to do this assessment, it's almost like 9 times out of 10 that they're a manifesting generator, because I just find that trio works really well. I don't know manifestors as well. And I haven't actually come into that many manifestors in the business experience where I've gone through and had people do the assessment.
Just for the audience listening, a manifesting generator is a hybrid of a generator and a manifester. So before I define, I guess, a manifesting generator, I should first define a generator. So generators are the life force of the world. They have sustainable sacral energy. They are meant to wait and respond to life rather than initiate. That's interesting because it essentially means that somebody is predestined to have low agency, which is interesting, to say the least. Their natural theme is satisfaction. Okay, I would say I've certainly met people like that, just kind of content with the status quo and not really moving anything. But a manifesting generator moves fast, they multitask, they love efficiency, as you kind of just described, and their strategy is to respond and then inform before acting. Their theme is satisfaction and peace. Very interesting.
Yep.
So you would say, what kind of a role inside of a business do you think a manifesting generator would be? Like a COO?
Yep. Operations usually, account managers, CSMs, they love juggling 7, 10 things at the same time. They feel really happy when they have a lot of things going up in the air. They don't feel happy when they don't have things going. They usually are really great sort of account manager or COOs.
I'm curious then, you having not labeled yourself, but determined that you are a projector, how has that impacted the way in which you build? Because if it were to be true that I fill out the assessment and I'm a projector, something that I currently struggle with is, I don't know, what do I currently struggle with? I'm trying to build my company, and obviously I'm a CEO to 2 employees, basically. So I'm very, there's not a whole lot of people to lead and delegate to. And I'm also not in a place right now where I'm like, I need a whole lot of delegation. Like, I'm not in the business of empire building. I don't desire to be. I think I really want to build like lifestyle and happiness, ironically enough. So how have you used your knowledge of, I guess, your archetype to better your behavior, enjoy the process more too, most likely?
So I think just understanding your role in the company in particular is like, okay, what are the things that I'm really good at? What are my superpowers? And this comes back to all business, right? I mean, this is kind of business 101. How do you ensure that you have the right people in the right seats inside of your organization? So we are really good at painting a vision of the future and sort of rallying the troops. And so doing more of that, I think is really that's our job. It's like have a really clear vision of what the future looks like and sort of bringing all of the resources together in order to be able to do that is the best way, that is our sort of fulfillment, right? It's like the alignment of all of the different components so that we can get a very specific outcome. And then when you find yourself, so also just organizational design, like what are the roles inside of your company that need doing? What are the functions that need doing? What are the job roles that you create that you then hire for? But I think that's part of the other thing so I'm a splenic projector, which means I'm really good at tapping into other people and understanding energetically who they are, and kind of, I get a read on people really quickly. It's actually interesting because we go so deep that in our connections, it's hard for us to have a lot of connections because we feel like once we go over like 5 really deep, intimate, we connect really deeply with people. But once there's too many people in the room, we can't connect with everyone, and therefore we just don't feel safe. And it's been a really interesting thing to pay attention to my nervous system as I go into large parties and stuff where it's like too much for my nervous system. But in intimate settings, I like feel really, really like I'm in the right place. And I think the same thing with the company is being really intentional about who you're organizing and what those roles are, and designing them very intentionally, and then making sure that you have a system to hold people accountable to execution, which is not any rocket science or novel to this concept of human design. But I think just honoring your own strengths, 1, learning what your strengths are, and then 2, really believing in yourself, trusting in your strengths, that if you don't have a good read on someone as a projector, like trust it, and this is human. Again, it's kind of very human-y across everybody, but we have this like gut instinct that is actually something that shows up in our design, and is really powerful. And also it we know it relatively quickly. And so in human design, even your decision making, like how you make decisions, is sort of determined. And when you do your human design reading, you'll actually understand, how do I best make decisions? Am I someone that I need to actually sit with something for a while, or do I need to just trust my gut instinct can I trust my gut instinct out of the gate? I have that ability. So I feel really confident when I'm recruiting and I'm bringing people into the ecosystem of like, this is the right person, or something is off about this and I need to stop it. I think in the age of AI, getting back to like how do you leverage this, or how do you build a company around this? And particularly at the stage of business that you're at, where you're like, hey, I've got a team of 2. It doesn't just apply now to humans. It also applies to how you go about designing your AI agent teams. And I believe, have a really incredible superpower with being able to see all of the things that we could do and create this beautiful vision. But I also, when I found myself going down the rabbit hole with AI too deep, I overcomplicate things. I don't get to the bottom of something. Yeah. And so I'm finding more and more that bringing in people who are manifesting generators or generators to help me to do these very specific tasks of like getting to the bottom of completion of one really crucial component of the organization, like taking over media buying entirely with AI agents, and not just doing good, but doing far superior than a human could do, and building out ad accounts and media buying strategy and all of those things. That's an example of something that I've been really going deep on, but needing the support of other people to help me sort of finish it, complete it to the level that it needs to be in order to actually launch. And then once it's built, and it needs to be handed off to someone else to manage. And that's where my business partner, Natalia, and I have found an incredible working relationship, where I'm the guy that like cooks up the idea and gets it rolling, but then she's the one that takes it and brings it to, she brings it from 70% to 95%. And that's an example of where, understanding each other and your superpowers, and having other people understanding your team member superpowers, you can leverage them more to get outcomes that you otherwise wouldn't have got to without these other people.
I think that's a whole business model in and of itself, selling that specific application of AI agents through the lens of human design to business owners who don't know where to deploy them.
Perfect. Man, we'll add it to the list of 745 great ideas.
Yeah. I was definitely a victim of falling into like, I need to become an expert in AI and Claude Code and all these things. And I realized that it was such a, for those people listening and for yourself as well, if you've studied like pendulums and inside of reality transurfing and stuff, like it's AI as a whole is such a pendulum. And for me, for some people, it's a positive impacting pendulum. But for me, it was such a negative one. I always felt so behind the 8 ball. I didn't feel as though my learning curve was worth the ROI I was receiving in return, or I even like thought about it longer term in like a 3-month period. It still didn't make sense for me to do that. And so I essentially have gone about almost stripping all AI from my life, other than the ones that initially came out that helped me with compartmentalizing my ideas and doing research. Because again, it serves me and my truth in my current stage in business. I believe that I don't need all this AI stuff to hit the next milestone. Eventually, when there's more capital to deploy and growth becomes a constraint, okay, fantastic, right? We'll look into doing that. But, for the audience that I have, the few people that will be listening, or in eventuality, the many, if you're at a stage in your business where you don't need an AI agent team and you're doing like under 40 grand a month, 30 grand a month, just stop using fucking AI. Like, just build authentically as you would have in the past. This is my belief. You did far more successful than me materially, so you can obviously disagree. But you just need to fundamentally build and then replace with AI. I think that is what I'm going to do, and I think that's what's serving me best.
So here's some interesting insights that I've had from going really, really deep down the AI rabbit hole over the last, really since I'd say, like 9 months maybe, of going full-blown full blown,
AI
you know,
bot.
AI, basically experimentation with almost every AI model and all the different, OpenClaw, all
Yeah.
kinds of different systems, additional computers, servers, all of that. What I've learned is that the challenge that we face with it is that it perpetuates something that is a challenge with all entrepreneurs, which is shiny object syndrome. So much of building what you want to build and building something great is really just saying no to everything that comes up that is not that thing.
Yeah.
And so with AI, there's now all of these additional new things that are presented to you on a daily basis that you're sort of tapped into, and can pull you away from the thing that you actually need to do. And a lot of the
Hmm.
times, the thing that you actually need to do is do something like build an audience, right? Build a community, build authentic human interactions, whether that's with sales, whether that's with through content, whatever that is. Um, that's the stuff that the fabric of what a beautiful life is made up of, is building intimate connections with other human beings. That's kind of it. And so the question is, does AI actually help with that? And I think the short answer is no.
Hmm.
What I have found is that if you are very systems oriented and you have a business that has a series of processes, it can be extremely beneficial to work with AI to process improve. I think the main challenge that people have as entrepreneurs is that they don't think in systems, and they couldn't even map out what the 10 steps are that they have in place already to go through and that, like, what their process even looks like to deliver on their product or service.
Hmm.
And so I have found it to be very beneficial when I can process map, meaning I literally go onto a digital whiteboard like Miro or whatever, ClickUp, and I map out each one of the steps of a process that I have. And I ask the question, that if you go watch the Elon Musk clip of, like, he says what the most important things are. And then he said, elimination is number one. And so
Hmm.
AI isn't naturally just going to eliminate things. It's likely going to add more things or start to
Yeah.
modify the things that you already have in place and try to improve things. And along the way, add more stuff. And so I think if you are able to document processes and you're able to, as a result of that, uh, go through with AI systematically and figure out how AI can either make things more efficient, eliminate any unnecessary steps, and take over certain roles, you can develop a level of efficiency in that entire process that allows you to allows you a freedom, time, relationship, money, or location, right? And
Hmm.
so by getting more time back, by now having a team of AI agents doing all the media buying, I've now saved myself $6,000 a month on a media buyer and additional headache of incorrect reporting and all of these things. That now frees up additional cash flow in order for me to go and do other things with that, whether that's more take home income for myself personally, whether that's being able to reinvest in other take that cash flow and reinvest in other parts of the business to grow more. And I call myself, I realized this through doing many years of marketing, I am a growth operator. I am a fractional head of growth for companies because I think about how to grow a business. And growing a business is actually relatively simple in theory. There's two things. There's volume, which is how much are you, in our case, we run ads. So how much are you spending on ads? And how efficient is every dollar that you're spending? And so you could look at volume as also unit of time if you're doing outbound or whatever that is to grow a business. But if you can find the constraint that we always find is efficiency over time. You could spend $1,000 right now on ads and be super profitable. But if you spent $100,000 tomorrow, would it be profitable? Probably not. And so
Hmm.
you need to continuously find efficiency in your business in order to be able to grow. So for people that are really pursuing business growth, organizational growth, it can really help gain a level of efficiency that allows you to go much further than you would otherwise. Now, coming back to calling and purpose and all of those things, I think that's what everyone's being sold. And I do agree that it is helpful because I've actually seen it firsthand and I've done it myself. But I also think that it doesn't bring us any closer to what we were talking about in the first half of this, which is, what is your specific calling? I think it gets us distracted. I think it adds more shit to our plate, not less shit. And it's a lot of new shit that distracts us from what is really fulfillment to us. And
Yeah.
so I have fallen into this trap. I've been working on sort of dialing back my like obsessiveness that I've had over the last 6 months of going deep down the rabbit hole of understanding this stuff. But I always knew that 6 months invested now and understanding how these systems work and understanding how to build will ultimately bring me a level of efficiency that I can either, in time wise, go spend more time spearfishing and doing podcasts and talking with other incredible entrepreneurs and peers like yourself, or or whatever that looks like for someone else who's out there listening to this.
Yeah, I think, you mentioned there like shiny object syndrome. Like it's always the girl in the red dress, and especially in this, let's say, our bubble of society of online money, entrepreneurship, business as a whole, especially online, you really just want to be riding the wave that everybody else is. When you have conversations, what's the main topic of interest? AI. Okay, well, I want to be able to hold my own in a conversation because otherwise my ego would be touched if I couldn't. And I think that is the thing that most people are suffering from. Business owners like yourself are going down the rabbit hole, but for you, there's genuine application to its use, right? Like you're saying, you have more capital to deploy as a result of the benefit from the AI. You can get more of the freedom, let's say time wise, to go spearfishing in the Bahamas with Deep, whatever it may be. But for a founder who's not at your stage and not even at, I don't even know, like, I don't know, 25K a month, like making a couple $100,000 a year, whatever it might be. It's not, I just don't think it is worth your time relative to the efficiency you spoke of. Every minute you spend trying to perfect an AI system operationally isn't another dollar inside of your business. It's a distraction to what is actually going to move the business forward. And then you get the people who are like, oh, but I'm building for the future. It's like, well, there's no fucking future if you don't actually build towards that future and get clients. I don't know. Like, I fell into the trap of trying to use this Claude Code stuff, and I realized very quickly, for me, all I really needed was these vibe coded website stuff. And so, for my dozen clients, I vibe coded an entire dashboard that keeps them personally accountable and that they can have their entire experience through. Okay, that's the sufficient amount of my AI usage in my business right now. Now I just need more clients. And then when there's a fulfillment constraint, okay, let's revisit, right? Or when I want to spend fucking $1,000 a day on ads, which I'm certainly not at the point to do, right? But tied to that, when I mentioned the future, a personal question for me that you as a CEO, materially successful one, how do you, this is going to be the wrong wording, but how do you visionary? How do you think about the future from a business sense? Is it structural? Is it how it applies to your life? Like, what is the manifestation inside of your mind when you think about the future for your business?
Great question. I think when I think about the future, so my vision has always been to, with the marketing agency, initially I started it a lot like I started my yachting career, which was, or my chefing career, which was, I want to find a way to get paid to travel, a really simple thesis. I wanted to find a way to get paid to get my PhD in marketing and understanding behavioral psychology. And I feel like I've done that. I've accomplished that. And so now for me, it's like, okay, I built this world-class skill set. We've gotten some incredible transformations. We have some awesome clients that we've gotten to work with. And what is next? And so for me, it's more of, I want to continue to do the thing that I love to do, which is build these revenue engines. I find this architecture, this designing of these systems to be really intriguing. It's kind of the overlap of craftsmanship, a lot like cooking or, a more of a trades business. You're designing something, you're building it, you're tweaking it. It's a constant optimization. So I really just love the pursuit of continuing to build these revenue engines for companies, and getting to look for more, getting the optionality to continue to work with businesses that I genuinely enjoy working with. And so right now, what I see for the future is, this skill set will never go away. Businesses will always need help with growth. They will always need help in marketing and understanding how to bring more people into their business. And so now I get to play and look for higher leverage opportunities. So one is I get to previously I would just basically sell full blown growth packages and get it fully integrated into people's businesses. And so now I only want to work with businesses that one, are really well organized. They're actual organizations. And I've met most businesses are not. Most businesses don't have their shit together. So that is a prerequisite. And I now look at being brought onto any business as I am a private equity fund about to invest a significant amount of time into growing your thing. I actually have to like you. I have to believe in your vision. You have to do good for the world in some capacity. Like, I'm not going to just go and do, sell, more pharmaceuticals or something that I don't believe in. And then also my long-term vision is to just basically be able to tie into a private equity fund. How that happens and what that looks like exactly, I'm very open and receptive to. I think right now I'm having fun building these engines and building an elite team of people that I genuinely enjoy showing up and working with every single day. We make great money, and I know that I'm adding massive business value, and I'm able to leverage that more and more every single quarter that I do this work, as we build more case studies, testimonials, and proof that we do what we say we can do.
Yeah.
And then vision for the future. Like, when I was in the yachting industry, I made a lot of money and got to save all of it because I basically
had no expenses.
The yacht took care of everything, right? Yeah. I lived literally on a yacht. And so I backpacked through South America for 6 months when I was 23. And I, during that time, had an incredible trip and got to experience so much of the world, hit 5 countries in South America. And by the end of it, I was hungry to go back to work. And so I think one thing for me is create a life that you don't need a vacation from. Create a business that you don't need a vacation from is sort of a North Star, and continuing to strive to make that a reality every single day for myself, and then for everybody that I work with as well, making this the best place for them to actually show up and support their families. And I want to create that environment, and it's not an easy job. It's really hard to profit is not a natural thing, and so you have to continue to push for that every single day. And sometimes you got to tear it down the walls to the studs and go all over and build all over again. But that's my vision for the business, is to ultimately get tied into a private equity fund where we're able to add massive value to their portfolio of companies. It's probably some version of a roll up. We've already had opportunities to do that, but it's really about, I think I look at all of these growth partnerships like business marriages, really. Yeah. And so I want to date and make sure that I'm dating the right people before I get married to anybody. And I'm in no rush, right? There's no rush. And I think we're in a great position to be able to continue to practice our passion for now.
I'm curious because you seem to be very clear. Obviously, you've been intentional about getting clear on what that vision looks like. When you go through that process, when you visualize the North Star, what gives you that clarity? Is it, okay, when I achieve the North Star, my business structure looks like this. I have X amount of clients. Those clients are being serviced by X amount of employees in Y role. I have Z fulfillment structure. Or is it more of like, I don't worry at all about the structure. I defer that responsibility to someone else. All I worry about is, how does my life look like when we achieve that North Star? What does my day look like? More like, not vibey, but you kind of get what I mean. More like life versus very structured business view.
Yes. There was a saying when I worked in the yachting industry: if you don't like the plan, wait 5 minutes because it's likely to change. I believe, after being in the trenches of running a marketing agency for the last 5 years, 6 years now, building and selling a business before that, going through that COVID with that business, helping another business scale from 2 to 10 million in 18 months, things never unfold exactly as you think they are. And so I am more of the belief of paint that vision of the future for yourself and the way that you want to, the life that you want to live, the state that you want to be in. And for me, a lot of my vision was to basically come full circle from the yachting industry and buy my own sailing yacht and be able to go cruise around the Caribbean and around the world and live on that boat. And one of the most uh, freeing moments, the most beautiful experiences that I've ever had, where I feel the most at peace, is sitting on the trapeze, which is the mesh net on the front of a catamaran, a sailing yacht,
Yep.
and being able to cruise and just, sun outside, being able to lay there in sort of a meditative state. And so really it's about creating that for myself. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be on a yacht or I will not be happy, but it's about that is what it's all for. And being able to go and do these trips that I really enjoy, spending time with my close friends, and going in pursuit of these diving adventures and spearfishing and all of that stuff is really where my happy place is. So it's all, business is a vehicle. Like if I could wave a magic wand, I would have that boat right now. And rather than flying to the Bahamas to stay in an Airbnb, I would just be flying to that boat. So I'm still living it today. I'm just doing it at a capacity that I can in this moment. And when I'm able to hit the financial targets that I want to buy this very specific boat that I have on my vision board, I will continue to build a company towards that, and I'll probably be no more happy, but just be doing it exactly how I designed. So I think try to live that life right now too.
Do you reverse engineer it from that then? Right? Because what I'm trying to get down to the bottom of is personal struggle for me is I found myself drifting because my business is only like about, let's call it 60 days old, right? This one specifically that I'm building. And so the one before, obviously older, and then I was the COO for a business. But this one specifically only 60 days old. And let's call it on day 30, I was like, okay, well, my days are content and, maybe some fulfillment. Maybe I'm doing this. There wasn't really like okay, we are accomplishing this by this day because it is going to feed into this goal, which is going to then feed into this goal. And so I solved that problem of finding a goal for the quarter. By the end of the quarter, I want to accomplish X, Y, Z. But there's still not the North Star. I know what I want to do. I know what kind of life I want to live, but I don't know the structure of the business, how it'll look in that environment. I was told yesterday, likely because I don't have the business acumen to actually visualize that yet. So maybe how do you reverse engineer backwards, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
Or maybe just directly the question.
Yeah. So I do think goal setting is very important. I think measurement is very important. And I think there's this dichotomy of the sort of spiritual, visualization, and also the more granular, less ethereal, what's our revenue target for this quarter and how do we do? And being able to measure and do a retrospective, I think is really important. Google, I studied and actually got a certification in objectives and key results, which is the methodology, the goal setting methodology that Google used to grow from some insane numbers like 400K in revenue to like 900 million in 4 years or something like that in revenue.
Yeah.
And they attribute a lot of that success to their system for setting goals and measuring against that. And I really do believe that goal setting quarterly is extremely important. Having a North Star of where you want to go, making sure that you paint that vision for the future for the whole team so that the team feels aligned towards something, that there's an actual mission that they're on. I mean, this comes back to storytelling even, right? The hero's journey. You are part of a journey, and people will show up differently when you're able to rally them towards that. So I think it's very challenging in the beginning of every business because you are usually all by yourself. And so you're the coach, you're the CEO, and you mop the floors, right? You're the whole ops team.
Basically.
And so it's really challenging to be a one-man show because you don't really have all these people to sort of help you create this environment. I think keeping it simple is the hardest thing. And painting a vision of the future for 12 months and continuing to measure yourself against that quarterly and monthly is really important, one way or another. If you can do that while you're by yourself or doing it with a coach, having someone externally to hold you accountable to that, it's not that you need them because they're smarter than you. You could do it yourself, but it's because we need to be held in a container a lot of the times. That's why therapists have therapists, right? We're not, this is part of the beauty of the human experience, that we get to share these things with other people. So rather than a limitation that, oh God, I'm not great at goal setting because I didn't set my own goals. Actually, you're probably pretty damn good at goal setting. It's just that you didn't create the environment for yourself to do this. And so whether that's, booking a 1 hour call once a month with a coach who's going to help you set simple goals, and in objectives and key results, the hardest part is not setting the goal. The hardest part is limiting it to basically one thing. And what is the one thing that that all else, that is above all else, the most important thing for us to accomplish this quarter? And how do we measure success? From where we're at today to where we want to go, and how do we make sure that we check in on that frequently so that we're reminded every single week that this is what we're working towards, and we can align our actions, our activities on a daily, weekly basis towards that goal. It is a simple formula. It is challenging in practice when you do not have an external accountability source. That is what my experience has been. I think, and I would recommend that everybody has a coach at some capacity to help you with that. We hire an objectives and key results facilitator to come in and work with us. And all she does is ask questions and create the container and keep the time and make sure that everything is documented. So it allows us to be the lying in the therapy chair, answering all the questions proverbially.
I'm curious what your take on this would be then. How do you not split the difference? How do you balance living in the gap and in the gain relative to that? Because having a goal essentially is an admission that you're in a gap, but a huge amount of people unfortunately treat that gap as their identity, right? Mm-hmm. As a result of me not having achieved this yet, I am not worthy of whatever my definition of that would be. And so I teach a lot about living in the gain, or at least not tying your identity to the gap. How do you see that manifesting for yourself, or what's your framework for balancing that?
Celebrate the wins. Create space every week to celebrate the wins. Create a wins channel. Everything that, make sure that be the champion of your own success. And I 100% believe in the gap of the gain, whole mentality. And I've read the book, and we've woven it into our Monday stand-up meetings, where, one thing we do when we get started is celebrate the wins. Make sure that we start off with what went well today. Even on a daily basis, I try to do that with my assistant, who I check in with every single day. Part of our routine is going and celebrating the wins. What went well today? What did we accomplish? Because it's easy. We default usually to the gap, particularly for people who are growth minded, who are not happy with the status quo and have ambitious goals. So I think atomic habits your way into it. Stack it into something that's already you're doing one way or another, and make it easy to celebrate the wins more than you focus on the gap.
Fantastic. You hear that, everybody? Focus on the wins. Just win every day and acknowledge those victories. All right, we'll leave it there. Gray, thank you so much for being a guest and taking the time to share your knowledge, obviously with me. Great win for me, but also with the audience. For those of you that have listened to this point, I thank you for listening. And I'll see you guys in 2 weeks when there's another episode of this with an indeterminate guest. We'll see what happens. All right. Thanks, brother.
Thanks, Tristan. Take care.